All right. Good evening, fellow heretics. Hope y'all are hyped by that as much as I am. I'm currently a little bit bummed because I just went to the store to get a beer for the show, and they card you there. And I learned that my license expired yesterday, and they were like, "I can't sell you the beer that's expired." I'm like, it still says I'm 38 years old, and if expired, that means I'm older. So fucking give me the damn beer. But yeah, it didn't work. So I got coffee instead. It's almost as good. But I got some guests backstage. We'll bring them up, and then we're gonna learn about a little bit of history stuff as we do, and it's gonna be a good time. But before we do that, let me pull up my intro.
Hold on to your butts.
All right. Hey, guys. Hey, what the Beck? Good to see you, man. Everybody else talks in the chat, I'll say hi to him.
Your intro just slays. It's so right? Good. God, I just love it.
It's a shame I don't get to play it more often.
I agree. It is a shame.
I used to play it every week, but I've slowed down.
It's age.
It's all right. We're here now.
They have a pill for that.
I'm sorry. I was backstage. You're going to have to explain how this works. You were carded?
Yeah. Yep.
And you're how old?
38. Yeah, so some places require it. It's just a law. It doesn't matter what you
just like no matter who you are.
Yeah, like everybody gets carded.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is a not a beer store or liquor store. It's a grocery store that just sells like beer and wine.
Yeah. Okay.
So the grocery store is like, I need your card. And they're like, it's expired. I was like, the fuck?
And
it expired yesterday.
Expired.
Bullshit. Yeah.
And they can't sell it to you because it's expired.
Yep, that's how that works over here in America land. I know.
I don't know how.
Land,
it's been so goddamn long since anybody asked for my ID to buy anything. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's weird here. Some places will card you, some places won't. Like the liquor store will not card you, but a restaurant will.
Wow, eh? Oh yeah. So I mean, the last time I was carded, I was in the States, but I'm pretty sure I was only like 26 years old. So wow, eh?
Hi, Crystal.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I buy most of my alcohol at Costco now. They don't card me. So I think it's the amount I bring in to the counter checkout is probably a motivation for the sale. So they're like, just get this guy out of here.
Can I tell you guys a sad story?
Please.
If you had sad music, you could play it while I tell my sad stories. But everyone's gonna have to just imagine. You're gonna have to time the violin in your head. Everyone start playing it. So, I live in Canada, which is wonderful. But I also live in British Columbia, which is also wonderful. But they've got weird. Thank you, Pragmatic Crystal.
Tiny violin.
They've got weird liquor laws here in BC in comparison to the rest of Canada. Like, for instance, as far as I'm aware, across the country, the drinking age is 18 years old. Here in British Columbia, it's 19 years old. And in most places in Canada, you can go and buy alcohol at private liquor outlets. And of course, as a result, most people in this country go to Costco, like Pat, to buy their liquor. But because I live in British Columbia, and because of the weird laws here, Costco can't sell liquor. So I have to pay more than the rest of my brothers and sisters in this land of ours.
You know what else is sad? I didn't get to mention about my story is they brought out the Samuel Adams Pumpkin Ale, the seasonal ale that I really look forward to every year.
Sounds yummy.
I was like, they have it, yes. And then they're like, nope, can't.
Oh no!
So I'm like how long is it going to take me to renew my license?
How
can't
long
remember
is that going to take?
Well, I mean,
8 years ago, or something. I don't know.
As a former,
I don't want to go to the DMV.
You still have your military ID card. They don't expire, right? Once you're discharged.
That's true, isn't it?
Yep.
My military ID is like packed in like a hidden pocket in my wallet. I keep forgetting it exists.
Yeah.
But maybe I could have pulled that out.
You could go back tomorrow.
I'm gonna go back right now. I'm gonna put y'all backstage. I'll be back in 10 minutes. I was excited about that beer, man.
I just want to point out that in honor of Kipp, you can't see it because, it's over here. Right there, the logo right there. I'm wearing my Burnaby Gaming Association T-shirt.
Beauty.
Yeah, it's a little town outside of Vancouver, like a suburb. I guess is a good way to put it, right?
I believe Burnaby is the fourth largest city in British Columbia.
But isn't it but it's right next to Vancouver.
Yeah. They all just bleed into each other,
it's
right?
It's like LA and Long Beach, right?
Yep. Yeah. My wife, the company that she works for is located in Burnaby. So
all right. Well, that's enough useless BC information.
We got the small talk out of the way. Hey, Jimothy.
Are we getting to the big talk?
This is why we got to bullshit for a few minutes. Get some of the cool people to trickle in. It's all good.
It looks like they're all there.
All there. Yeah.
Hey there.
President accounted for.
Cool people.
Well, that's to supplement us not being cool. You have to have cool people in the audience so we can.
Yeah.
All right. So, did not get to do as much prep work as I wanted to because my in-laws came to visit surprisingly, and then I had the beer situation happen. But we're going to start with. Let me just pull up. There's the thing you sent me, Pat.
Great introduction. I love it when my students come to the office and say, "Hey, I know we have a test today, but I didn't read the chapter." Like that's basically what you're just saying right now.
No, see, I read a lot. I just didn't prepare any.
Right, and that's okay then. That's
I've been reading John J. Collins all day today.
That's not bad.
Which is easy to do.
You could do worse than reading John J. Collins all day.
Yeah.
So
you could read Ron Wyatt. Anything Ron Wyatt.
Did Ron Wyatt write things?
Speaking of Ron Wyatt.
Yeah. Not really.
Okay.
Where are we at? Where did I put this thing?
I mean, I've seen Ron Wyatt.
I watched that whole interview, that like a documentary interview type thing. That's like 2 hours long, and he's like, "Yeah, I saw these angels, and they were like, don't take our pictures." And then he couldn't take a picture of the ark, so he brought back a stalactite he's like, this pierced the top of the ark, and that's how we know I found the ark. It was totally there. They're like, "Wow, can we see it?" No, you can't see it. Only I can see it because the angels told me only I can see it.
Well, he did take a picture though of the ark. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, haven't you?
Did he?
Yeah, he did. Let me find it. Okay, because I gotta show it. It's brilliant. But yeah, my favorite Ron Wyatt clip though is I think him talking at a church, and when he gets to the part about how they found blood on the mercy seat of the ark, and then they went and tested the blood on the mercy seat of the ark. Okay, here it is. I'm sorry, it's just so funny.
Are you able to pull it up?
Yeah, I am. Just give me a second. Still, I can't
remember if y'all had permissions to do that or not yet.
Yeah. If I and when they found when he's telling this story about the blood on the mercy seat, and then they went and got it tested at the lab, and found out that it didn't have it was like it didn't have enough chromosomes or something like that, and he's weeping as he's telling this story.
I think I do remember this. Yeah,
It's so hilarious. Okay, here, are you guys ready to see the photograph that Ron Wyatt snapped of the Ark of the Covenant?
What is that? That's like his scrotum or something. That's there's no way that's not his ball sack. Look at that thing.
Hell is that?
It couldn't be anything other than his ball sack.
Let me see if I can find the interpreted version here, because it requires interpretation. Oh, here we go. Yeah, there's it requires interpretation.
To say the least.
Sure. They didn't have high res imaging at the time.
Okay. This is probably not going to be as good. Come on. Oh no, I don't want to do that. Sorry. Let me. Okay. Open image.
Shit.
There we go. So yeah, this one's. I'll have to. Let's see if I can. All right. This is the best I can. This is the best I can do. But let's see. Okay, everyone's got that in their mind.
Yep.
They remember that one, right? Okay. Yep. So here's the interpretation of the image.
What? Why is there a Russian dude?
I don't know what's going on. Oh, if only Ron had a better camera.
Are we sure he didn't find the tomb of Rasputin? Because that's what that looks like.
It doesn't look like. I mean, I've had my kids draw on crinkled paper before. Doesn't mean that it's an artifact.
Wow.
No, that's true. So yeah.
So many thoughts.
Yeah. That's the Ark of the Covenant, guys.
I'm glad that's solved.
Why? My question is, why hasn't anybody run that through AI imaging yet? Just to see if it, like we did the shroud recently and figured out what Jesus looked like. Someone needs to get on that.
Somebody needs to do that.
Now
I'm excited about this.
It's bad. I don't know. I'm glad that I had a couple of beers earlier because it's making this easier. But if I was 100% sober right now, I'd be more angry. It's like it's all in good fun.
It's because Pat's an archaeologist.
Yeah.
Speaking of archaeology and Ron Wyatt.
Well, no, just the whole, when we were talking about this, just the whole people talk about chariot wheels in the bottom of the Red Sea. And, probably, again, there's people there's archaeologists that literally write books debunking this bullshit. But I think the most important thing to remember is there's been, quote unquote, in the pseudoscience community, there's been a few people write about it. Lennart Moller, Scandinavian guy, was probably the one. He took the, I don't want to call it best stab at it, but he tried to write. He's a doctor who tried, I don't know if he's an MD or PhD, but he does something like medicine, like herbal medicine, some type of pharmacology or ancient pharmacology background. I don't know. I mean, but he's not a historian or archaeologist, right?
He was a nurse, or like a male nurse or something like that.
Right. So
Ron
Wyatt as an anesthesiologist. Yeah. This guy, I think, was his background may have been in biological sciences, but he definitely wasn't a archaeologist or historian by training. Moeller wrote a book, and he tried to use all of the Graham Hancock and he used Ron Wyatt stuff to try to prove the case of the Exodus. And one of the big parts of his book are these chariot wheels that were found at, in the bottom of the Red Sea. He came up with this hypothesis and everything. And there's been people that have looked at the quote unquote images. Well, important to remember that he puts his entire case, well, not entire, like 90% of his case are on these gilded, golden chariot wheels that were found. Interestingly enough, those are one of the few artifacts that were never photographed. they've been drawn like, hey, I saw this and this is what I saw in the drawing, but no photographic imagery of this object, no attempt to recover, excavate this, right?
Maybe he had Ron Wyatt's camera,
right? And even those people who have looked at some images are already, you know, that were later brought up, were like, well, first of all, they're wrong for wheels of this period. Like, even if what you're saying is there wouldn't be correct. First of all, you're looking at stuff that was cast instead of hammered. Like, there are all these critiques of the work, right? Like, this is just not how they made chariot wheels back then. In the best case scenario, you're talking about wheels that may have been made in the last few hundred years, or in, you know, later portion of the Iron Age, where they started casting things differently, or as far as using pour mold technologies for iron. But this is not, if you're trying to put these in the Bronze Age, you're absolutely full of shit. But they stuck with that throughout the whole thing, and it was largely rejected. And then one of the pictures you see in all these pseudoscience blogs about, you know, chariot wheels being found is one of the images I supplied to you. It's actually from a shipwreck, from the Ulysses. Now, what's funny is, if you're an avid scuba diver, you can go see this today. You can go to the Red Sea, pay a dive chartering service, you know, go down to about 30 meters and see the shipwreck of the Ulysses that sunk in 1887. It's at 30 meters. It's not, I mean, 30 meters is about 90 feet. So if you're not trained, you could get in trouble as far as equipment needs. But most trained archaeologists are more than competent to dive down with even what we, you know, they're not even called, you know, standard traditional SCP device. Basically, you don't need to go on liquid oxygen or nitrogen systems. You can drive down with regular compressed air down to this depth. You just can't stay very long. But you go down and see this yourself. And there's actually dive charters that will take you here. Well, this is one of the pictures that ends up in a lot of these pseudoscience magazines. But we know where it's from, and we have pictures going back for at least 50, 60 years of varying quality. But now digital imagery, like, everybody goes down there, adds more images to these collections, saying, hey, I just dove the Ulysses wreck. Here are my photos. And it's really helping us to debunk the really bad, you know, pseudo archaeology. But this is it. I've people on blog who say, look at that chariot wheel. Well, that's been identified.
Is it a wagon wheel?
No, it's a pulley system for
yeah, of course.
Right. So it was part of the engine. Either it had a belt, some type of belt system on it. I mean, there's an actual marine archaeologist who actually pointed right to what it is. Right. So it's part of the mechanism of the ship. It can be traced to, someone can actually find a photograph of it when the Ulysses was an actual ship or ships like it, right, of that class. This wasn't a lot of detective work, but this has been, I've seen images where people have drawn arrows. This is a chariot wheel found at the bottom of the ocean. This proves
Pharaoh Ramses' chariot wheel.
Right, exactly. Yeah. This kind of thing. And it's just, we know exactly what it is. We know exactly where it's from. The shipwreck was documented in history. It was found. There were artifacts found dating it, you know, contemporaneous in the area that dated it to the shipwreck. There's no conspiracy involved, but they think it is, right? And this is one of the things that I think pseudoscientists are willing to do, is engage in both the acceptance of fraudulent material without any inspection, or they create their own fraudulent material. Like, miscategorizing that photograph as a chariot wagon wheel may not seem like it's fraud to you, but you know what it is. Yeah. It was published as X. No, that's not X. A photograph taken of the Ulysses shipwreck. That's actually evidence for a wagon wheel, with no allusion to what the earlier people said. So it's kind of an anachronistic fabrication, right? It really is. We're going to put it way back into history when it's not there, and there's no evidence to support it being put back. So it's pretty obvious of what they're trying to do. And there's been a lot of criticism of this kind of stuff, but I hate to say it, I read this in a report, and I think it's the journal Religion. About 40 to 50% of people in the United States believe in some or most of this pseudoscience bullshit that they hear, like ancient civilization bullshit, like chariots in the Red Sea. They actually, there's a propensity to believe this, even on people that aren't necessarily religiously minded, that are just kind of unskeptical and uncritical in their, presentation history. There was a survey done, kind of informal in my own region, and we just asked, among colleagues and stuff, how many of your students are bringing articles in from like Ancient Origins, thinking it's an authoritative website for archaeological and historical data? And, again, we're kind of shocked in the field going, we really need to get in before you're a first or second year college student. We need to get to you like in high school. You need to start learning how to get through this stuff, because we're seeing a lot with the availability in the internet. Far too many students are coming in and they're ill prepared to even sort through the bullshit anymore, because it's so much out there and so many people believe it's real, or at least are inclined to think it's okay to use as a site.
What's interesting that, go ahead, Kipp.
No, I was going to say, I think part of the problem, Pat, is that many of these presenters sound really convincing. Like when you're not, when you don't know the material, or if you don't understand the difference between someone like Graham Hancock and like an actual archaeologist. Like, right. I think the first time I heard Hancock and his stuff about moving, because he's one of these guys, right, who wants to challenge the conventional dating of Egyptian of the Egyptian periods and the text and things. Mm-hmm. And when I saw, I don't know if I saw it on a video or it might have been in like a Joe Rogan podcast. I think I was still working on my PhD. But even just listening to him or watching the presentation or whatever, I looked at it and said, well, that certainly sounds credible. Right? The way that it's presented, I knew enough to know something this dramatic, I should probably check and see what actual, like what most archaeologists are saying, or Egyptologists or what have you. But just without any of that background information, and even as someone, with graduate school training in antiquity, I can make the connection between what he's saying and like I said, it sounds credible. And when people are really, really confident about what they present in the general public, that on its own convinces people a lot of people. Like I'm pretty sure that my content, there's a lot of people who just don't watch it or aren't interested in it because of the nuance that I put into it. And I see this in my comments all the time, where people will complain about me saying things like, if possibly, perhaps, but this is just the way that responsible scholars.
Yeah, that's how you communicate.
Talk, right?
You're not certain of anything. Like you can be confident of a lot of things, but you're never certain about anything.
Well, and this chariot wheel thing has been going on since the 70s, right? Mm-hmm. This is supposedly when this was found. And if you look, every few years, this will raise its head again. A new group of archaeologists will come out and debunk it. It'll go back underground for a while. The mm-hmm. true believers will keep it alive, and then it'll pop up again. And then either it's basically archaeologists get tired of debunking it, the same ones, and the new ones take over, or basically there's just this general, fatigue in the archaeology community to sit there and keep having to debunk it, because debunking is like going through the evidence, showing everything, writing a formal paper, right? Like it's sometimes can get very elaborate. It takes work, right?
Yeah.
Or, you got to write, if it's not a book, you got to write, if it's not a book, you at least have to write a chapter of a book, right? Or a very in-depth article. And then you have to just basically still get yelled at that you're part of this conspiracy theory that is designed to push, to keep us out of the know, right?
Yeah.
The global elite don't want you to know.
Or a bunch of elitists.
Right.
And like if you're a professional working in this field and you're trying to advance your career, turning around and focusing on this obvious bullshit is a waste of your time. It's not going to help you get anywhere in your career. It'll just maybe help you get some clout with some edgy internet atheists. That's about it. Like other than that, it's not worth your time if you're a professional. Like, well,
it can hurt you too. Like if you're one of these few people that are credible in your field and you go on a show like Joe Rogan to sit opposite Graham Hancock, there's a lot of people in the field that will sit there and say, why would you even take your actual PhD, sit across from a total hack, and do anything to validate their position by taking the same space? Now, you may completely debunk Hancock in real time, but you still platformed yourself alongside him. So big archaeology doesn't want you to know the truth about giants. Exactly, Jimothy. That's what's going on. But it's there's been people critical of even, reputable scholars that have taken the time to go on Joe Rogan and buy into the quote unquote hype and bullshit. Because often these discussions are very nuanced and they're often loaded, right? Like, well, have you been there? No. So you didn't dive down to the actual shipwreck where, or the chariot remains where Hancock found this, right? Or Wyatt found this stuff. No. Well, so you're relying on other people. Yeah, other trained experts in marine biology, marine archaeology, right? That, or in some cases, it's like a marine archaeological survey that's not just archaeology, it's biology, archaeology. I mean, so this multidisciplinary survey of the site, you didn't go with them. You're relying on the experts in the field. And like all of a sudden you're like, then you're full of shit because Ron Wyatt and people like Graham Hancock are the ones that are going to bring you the truth with absolutely no actual training in the field, but they're going to, bring you the silver spoon that was used to feed Jesus. Okay. I don't know how you fight that.
Yeah, that's what, again, Graham Hancock was saying about. We were talking a little bit about that Netflix documentary shit show, Ancient Apocalypse.
Right.
That's the one that came out a year or two ago, right?
Yeah, 2022, and it got a whole bunch of pushback, including from what's the organization? And anyway, a big organization pushed messaged Netflix. It was like everything he's saying is wrong. You need to take this show down. At the very least, don't renew it for season 2. Or no. They wanted to have it renamed to science fiction and not documentary.
Correct.
That's what it was.
And it wasn't just one big group; it was several big groups.
Yeah,
like there are several prominent groups in "quote unquote" the archaeological community, depending on your discipline, that kind of said this is crazy. But like groups like the Archaeological Institute of America, the Israeli Antiquities Authority, there were many groups that said this is fucking bullshit. Now larger bodies may have been the ones that formally like said, okay, Netflix, you need to do something, but it was generally, there were publications made around this. I posted just one example of a article that was written in response to the Apocalypse Show. And that was by Mark Aldendorfer. He's actually an archaeologist. He calls himself an anthropologist, but archaeology in the United States is a subdiscipline of archaeology. I don't want to get into it, but he's a professor. He's like the head of the anthro and archaeology department at UC Merced, and he's well known and regarded. He actually wrote an article talking about challenging counter-established archaeology that was published in 2023. We put the link in the show notes if you want to read it. But basically, I think one of the best sentences in there is that he says, Hancock does not describe himself as a scientist, but does use the findings of archaeology when convenient and dismisses them when they do not conform to the story he seeks to tell. And then later on, he goes on and talks about the profit motive and why he does this. So not only is he the worst type of purveyor, he ignores counterfactual evidence to his position, he has a profit incentive to do so. So that's the kind of thing that,
honestly,
I mean,
I don't know, that just sounds like every Christian apologist I've encountered when it comes to, proving the historicity of the Exodus or the conquest or the United Kingdom. Like it's just they all do this, right?
Yeah.
We hyper focus on the bits of evidence which appear to align with the case that we have predetermined to be the truth, to be, and then we're just going to skate past
the establishment are just sticking with the status quo, and they're trying to suppress anybody who challenges their ideas.
It's true, Claude Simeon. The United Kingdom is a myth.
Yep. Well, and then you'll see them
Atlantis,
article like World News Daily Report or some bunk website, and it keeps going around and around. Well, it says in World News Daily, but is that actually a website? Because is it? No, it's a spoof or fraudulent or fictitious website. It's not.
Talking a little bit about what you were saying about the reaction to that Netflix series and wanting to change the label from documentary to a science fiction.
Yeah.
I just that right away that makes me think about, like, what are we talking about? Like, what is a documentary? Because this is a genre, this is a category that is I mean, it's kind of anything you want it to be at this point, isn't it? Like our good friend Derek Lambert over at Mythvision Podcast makes documentaries, and by and large, like a lot of them are really good, and he works really, really hard at using credible scholarship and gets things vetted, a lot of things vetted with actual scholars. Inspiring Philosophy does the same things, making documentaries, right? But what are these? Like, these are there's no control on this. I'm just before you say something, Pat, I'm thinking about maybe one of the most prominent ones a number of years ago. I'm sure we all watched Netflix's Making a Murderer, right? Are you guys familiar with this show, or am I the only one?
Heard of it, but I never saw it.
A hugely popular documentary series on Netflix. And I was like I watched this whole thing and was like right there with the subtext of this show, which was intended, like the whole premise of this show was that this poor guy got arrested and convicted for first-degree murder just because the corrupt police establishment in his hometown was just out to get him. And it was such a compelling show that when I went in and actually looked, I took the time to actually just do a quick perusal of the media response to this show, and quickly learned that they just cherry picked a bunch of data. They ignored a whole bunch of important evidence that was included as this trial, in an effort to paint this picture, to tell this story of who this guy is, right? And you can do that, and you can call it a documentary. And people look oftentimes at that label, documentary, on Netflix or Prime or Apple TV or what have you, and will understand that to mean the same thing as nonfiction, and equate that with some level of popular scholarship.
I would agree, and I think this is where I was foaming at the bit So I think documentary is something that we need as a society, and I hate to say academia.
I love them. I think they're great.
Plays important part is I think there should only be really 3 bodies, and each have their own problem. 3 bodies of institutions that should be producing documentaries. One are news agencies, right? They have a certain standard in their respective field, although it's been muddied up in recent decades. But like if a news outlet produces a documentary on X, I think they should use the title documentary. Academic institution or something associated with an academic institution should be able to use the term documentary. The third one, which is a little more problematic given propensity towards propaganda, or governmental agencies. Like, for example, the NTSB or something should be able to make a documentary on air safety travel or something like, or of an incident involving that agency. But when, as much as I love what Derek does and do not like what Inspiring Philosophy does, those are more, in my opinion, like investigative videos. They're getting a point across. They are engaging in an academic discussion, but I don't know if I'd call them so much as a documentary as a discourse on a topic.
Yeah, that's good.
And so like they're instructional for sure,
or something.
But even sometimes Derek will say, this is not the mainstream consensus. We're going outside that today. Well, that huge caveat takes it out of being a documentary as much, and would put it more into the frame of this is an academic exercise for everybody's betterment. And I think that's important as well. And in the case of Inspiring Philosophy, it's propaganda. So
yes, it is. Just so like on my channel, of all the videos that I have on my channel, there is one that I have in the past referred to as a documentary, and it's the film, it's the video that I made about Josh McDowell. And to further your point, Pat, the reason why, and you can see it at the end of the video, like I was actually funded by the University of Oxford to make that film, right? Like I was operating under an institutional banner of a publicly funded university as a trained scholar. So I mean, and I think that like that feeds into what you're talking about, right? I make a whole pile of videos that are just my own stuff. I would never call those documentaries.
No. And that fact that you can self-ascribe that label, and I'm not here to bash on YouTube or anything platforms like YouTube, but I've made videos on YouTube. You determine what it is, you'd label it what it is, and there is no policing mechanic for. I mean, and that's problematic. I mean, again, academia is not the perfect institution for this kind of stuff either. There's problems, but we got to work with what we have and set some standards. And without some institutional guidelines, either professional, governmental, or otherwise, it's going to be really problematic. So I think news agencies actually probably do some better fact checking than even sometimes we do as academics. We could both learn from each other, but the idea that you have to actually present all of your sources in a news story to your editor. Like, I got this from this person, this person, this person. Oh, I can't tell you about this person because they're a confidential informant unless you got this. In academia, we do it with bibliography and citation. And sometimes those citations don't get double checked because we assume, well, if Kipp says, and I'm using an example, Kipp says if Roethlisberger said this, then it's probably right. But even academics now are getting challenged at a greater level than they had before because the internet empowers search. And if I, for example, misquote Roethlisberger, Kipp, as my editor or someone else in the field doing peer review, is going to go, "Hey, Pat, you actually misrepresent Roethlisberger's position. So you either retract, rewrite, or somehow rephrase or reframe your argumentation with Roethlisberger's actual opinion." That happens all the time in academia. There's no mechanism for it on YouTube. It's really problematic.
Very true. my good friend Andrew Seidel, who's a legal scholar, when he wrote his book, American Crusades, he had some friends say, he challenged some friends and was like, if you can find an incorrect citation, I will give you a bottle of whiskey for every single one that you find. And so he had like a bunch of friends like go through and trying to find, and none of them found any of them. Like that's a good system. We need something like that to go in there and vet.
Wow. Well, I'm going to take my hat off to Andrew because I have yet to fucking do that and find one that's wrong. I've had people come back and go, Pat, I'm like, okay, I'll stretch it. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, so where do we go from here?
Let's talk about apocalypticism because that's right down these people's path. Because we found the wagon wheels, and so we know Jesus is coming back.
Yeah,
those dots connect.
They do.
That's
every time.
That's for sure too. The bottle of Lagavulin 16. Claude Simeon mentioned. Yeah, that's a good one.
I've never been privy.
So I think Pat knows this. Ricky, maybe you are not aware of this, but and this is totally an aside, but I made a new friend this summer. His name is Joel Karitko. He's a professor of Old Testament and Septuagint at Septuagint at I think it's Northwest Baptist Seminary, which is located on the campus of Trinity Western University. Found out that he and I live literally like 5 minutes away from each other, and even better, he is a whiskey collector. So a few times now, and hopefully more, he's come up to my house and we've hung out, and he's brought 7 or 8 bottles. Hang out.
7 or 8.
He's brought like 7 or 8 bottles. 7 or 8 bottles of like good shit, like really, really good stuff. So,
oh man,
that's my
just be a fly on that wall while y'all drink and discuss the Old Testament, the Septuagint.
We're thinking one of these days of just turning the camera on.
Oh, please do.
And broadcasting. I think it'd be fun. So maybe someday. But yes, the Lagavulin 16, which I had one of those evenings hanging out with Joel. It's very good. Very good.
Oh, okay. So apocalypticism. Let's see. Where did I want to start with this?
Well, you were reading John Collins all day.
Yeah, that's the thing is like it's so much. Even with as much as I've read already, it's still just like it's so much to think about. About all these different communities and how they had different ideas about apocalypticism and different understandings about the nature of evil and the nature of God's will and what they thought he was planning for the New Jerusalem or the New Earth or what have you. It was when you read the Bible today, you kind of think it's all like connected. It's all talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Like it's not. It's not like Isaiah will be talking about this community's idea. Jeremiah will be talking about this community's idea. Daniel will be talking about Enoch's community, or I'm paraphrasing, but then they'll all kind of come together a little bit at some point. But originally, like they were separate ideas. So anyway, I guess a good place to start. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think at the outset, part of the problem is this, right? Our access point for almost all of us. I would actually say, yeah, for everyone, our access point into Jewish apocalypticism comes through the New Testament, and as a result of that, like it was like that, for many years, even on a scholarly level, right? Like before the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, when scholars read apocalyptic literature, it was through this lens that we have in the New Testament, this Christian version of apocalypticism. So you'll discover in those first 3, 4, 5 decades of studies on apocalypticism after the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and as some of that literature started to get filtered out. I've talked about this a little before on this channel, I believe, on how the scrolls were discovered in between 1947 and 1953. It took many decades for the material even to be published.
Yeah, like and the 90s so were published, right?
1990s exactly is when things really started to break, and then the entire collection wasn't even the publication of the entire collection wasn't even completed until was it 2014, I think. So it's been a long time coming, but for most of this window, these decades after the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, when it came to discussing apocalyptic features or themes within the texts or language, it was always kind of read through pre-existing ideas informed by the New Testament. And now, like for the last couple of decades, 20 years or so, one of the great challenges has come from scholars going, hold on a minute, like, let's take a step back and start to read these texts a lot more carefully in their own right, without extrapolating from this other set of literature in order to help us, understand what this means. And all of a sudden, as you've already alluded to, like, this whole situation, this whole picture suddenly becomes much more opaque. It becomes not so uniform and linear, and we start to see this expansion of a variety of different ideas. Like, it's a useful apocalypticism, and bear in mind this is a modern word that was invented to describe stuff that we see, we think we see occurring in ancient texts, and trying to organize and categorize what's going on, and to filter it into comprehensible modern language. The ancient people who wrote this stuff wouldn't have understood themselves as apocalypticists. I mean, they wouldn't have any idea what that means. If you asked them what the defining features of an apocalypticist were, or apocalyptic literature,
they'd be like, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and this is like, it's useful because we can see patterns in various texts, but by the same token, it's limiting. Like, is this, I think it's fair to even ask, is this even a thing? Is apocalypticism even real? Or is this just us, trying to grapple with various texts of ancient literature that look similar to one another on these criteria that we have established, as
it's kind of like how we were just talking about documentaries.
Yep.
How can we? Should we be calling these documentaries? Should we not? Should we?
And I think the most problematic point is where we start as an academic discourse. I mean, there were, and I'm just going to say, historical incidents or periods that were seen as apocalyptic from other cultural reference points, right? So we have to define what is an apocalypse. Well, I think we go to the root language that it comes out of, which is Greek, which is like revelatory and like culturally changing. It's about the oppressed no longer being the oppressed, and a dynamic change of social social and or cosmic order, depending on how you want to frame it, right? So like when the Greek city-states were conquered by Rome, some ancient pre-Christian Greeks were writing about like the need for an apocalypse against Roman oppression. I mean, during their conquest of Greece, entire cities were enslaved and, in some cases destroyed all the way to the ground. Like these were seen as cataclysmic events that were hopefully going to, in some point in time, revelation be received on how the current status was going to be re-envisioned or rectified through the reestablishment of an earlier order or a better order than was already in place. So it's really hard because we typically look at apocalypticism from a very narrow Christian framework and then try to project it everywhere. But the concept's kind of cross-cultural, right? There are other cultures that have quote unquote apocalypticism, but we have to define the term first because it comes out of one specific region of the Mediterranean and then got heavily weighted with one cultural view, which is heavily Christianized. So everything else got diluted or pushed to the side. But what is an apocalypse? And are they incidents in times, or are they movements over temporal periods, or are they a general framework of how you look at the world? Because apocalypticists today, they're just waiting. Their whole life is waiting for this event to occur, right?
That's what I'm going to say. They're not always descriptive of the future. A lot of times they're descriptive of what's currently happening, why it's happening. Like, and it's interwoven into what they hope will happen to rectify their current situation. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so many thoughts. What do we think are some of the it's hard because a lot of the documents that we have are missing crucial points. Like they're missing parts of the beginning or parts of the end. So we don't even have a complete framework as to what they're really thinking or expecting, which makes it even harder.
Well, I think the important point is to identify the groups that this literature is coming out of. Again, like Kipp will tell you, these, at least with the groups he studies at Qumran, these were self-isolating, culturally repressed groups. Now, some of that repression was self-induced, some of that staving off, but they saw themselves as the marginalized group, right? So typically apocalypticism is associated with the have-nots versus the larger haves, right? This change of social or cosmic order. So it's identifying the group is probably right. Yeah. Exactly. I think that's a great way to define it.
So yeah, it's I think I've said this publicly before, but apocalypticism, and I prefer to understand it in terms of a worldview, and one which holds to a set of axioms, the notion that there are cosmic forces at work that affect the natural world, the idea that there's a sharp and a fixed divide between good and evil, and there are good and evil forces that are in this enmeshed in this eternal conflict, that there is a supreme God who oversees it all, but then also sees the end from the beginning and is controlling it all, and it's all part of a larger plan. So for a lot, you'll read in particular the Jewish apocalyptic literature is often very, very much concerned with history, with what's happened, in an effort to show that these are milestones along this this predetermined plan by this controlling deity of the universe, and he's orchestrating everything that's taking place, and will come to a culmination in the last days, at the end of time, right? When ultimately he is the one who will save us. And there's this clear sense among writers of apocalyptic literature that things are bad, they're oppressed, they're in periods of crisis. And it's not just that it's bad, but things have been getting progressively worse since the beginning. So there is a breaking point that they imagine to be just around the corner. We're right there, right? And it's at that point that God's going to break in, and he's going to fix it all, and everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be great.
And I think that's important too, because you have to look at the cultural framework in which we're going to view the upcoming apocalypse, right? Like in some cultural groups, it's your deity versus the deity of a foreign oppressive nation, right? Like, so, in Judaism, it's Yahweh. In other cultural systems, it's the gods of those states and nations, right? And it wasn't always just focused on this little area of Palestine. It was going on in many cases throughout the world. I mean, there's been a fair amount of discussion. I don't know if you guys remember the movie a long time ago, Apocalypto, about the Aztec expansion and conquest of the,
directed by Mel Gibson.
Right, of Mayan civilization areas. Right? Now,
great movie.
Is it a good movie? It's a good movie, right?
Yeah,
I haven't seen it.
I enjoyed it at the time. I'm a little more critical of it now, but that's fine. I don't want to get into Mesoamerican
It's hard to as an historian, I tend to just check. I tend to just check that stuff at the
framing that. I don't think that was an improper framing of how the people that were being displaced and oppressed and sometimes eradicated by Aztec expansion in Mesoamerica. We don't have their writings of the period, very little evidence from the people themselves to say how they'd express their cultural anxiety and individual anxiety over this what they saw as possibly the end of their understanding of the world and cosmic order, the changes in their lives. But it would be fair to frame it that way. I think that the title of that film is apt for the discussion we're having today. Like, that was a historical event that we know happened in history. There's archaeology to confirm it, but we don't know how people felt about it. Fortunately, when we turn to something like the community at Qumran, we can see what they were thinking and how they were interacting with what they saw was these progressive incidents, or the ones they were projecting back onto history, because they would be looking at the big picture in the past, but minutia at the time that they were at. Like, anything they could attribute to this steady march forward would be something they'd rally upon. Oh, Rome's giving us a new provincial governor. That's it. That's a sign we're looking for. Or, hey, this guy died, but he wasn't expected to die. His death was misfortune. So little localized and sometimes extra, larger events become more and more important for this matrix that you needed to show this eventual, it's like Kipp said, it's right around the corner, but we want a roadmap to how we're going to get there.
How little we've changed.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think this is a really important point, and something that I like to emphasize is that it's my belief that so what I think the study of apocalypticism and apocalyptic literature is really important for this reason, that I tend to think that we as a Western European culture have essentially inherited the major features of this worldview. It just completely impermeates so much of our modes of thinking about ourselves as a species, our history, and our future. Even if you think about something, even from a purely secular perspective, global warming, it's something that's happening. It's real. We're in serious trouble. But if you look at if you just do a perusal of the ways in which scientists, politicians, activists speak about this, it's an apocalyptic event. It's couched in this language and this terminology, and I think that's in large part a big reason for that is because we have just almost instinctive. It's what is it? It's not it's socially, we have this socially constructed way of viewing the world that we're not actively aware of, right?
Yeah.
And the reason we construct the narratives we do about the world, the reason we imagine our history and our future as we do, is because we have inherited something of this so-called apocalyptic mindset.
Yep. And I do want to point out there are a lot of, like, in general, again, I know there's all different purviews and permutations of this, but the general Christian concept of the return, the big battle, Armageddon. But if you start surveying religious traditions outside of Christianity, you realize it's not unique. Zoroastrianism, the world ends in a big battle. Yeah. Northern Germanic paganism and even Middle Germanic paganism, Ragnarok, like the concept that there's one final battle where good, evil happen. In some cases, good doesn't necessarily win, i.e. the Scandinavians, but in others, good prevails. The god of good or gods of good prevail, and they suppress and usher in a new, better order, right? Like, again, to think that this is the only culture and tradition that has a theme of this. I mean, Zoroastrianism predates Christianity by hundreds of years. So these were already concepts in play, and I'm not going to make any attempt to say that, where the Germanics got it from, right? But again, there were other people that had these ideas that, hey, there is an end of the world. I know that when we survey cultures in even further removed from the Mediterranean ancient Near East, we see these as well. But I'm not an expert on those fields, so I'm not going to talk about it. But we definitely see in the region that this idea that there's a returning deity who's going to destroy everything in one big climactic battle and then usher in a new era wasn't new. At least it wasn't new in the region.
I think you can even see it in I just wrote about this in the in the Deir Allah inscription, which is a Canaanite text, a Moabite text from the 9th century BCE. I think it betrays very similar elements to this that you see in Zoroastrianism, in Hellenistic Judaism, Christianity, in a lot of these other religious traditions.
During their conquest of the, in the Third Intermediate Period, the Persian conquest of Egypt, and the final detraction and ultimately the execution of the last pharaoh, Egyptians wrote in this tone as well. Like, there was this end of all things by a foreign influential power, that if the gods to return, and that's why when, again, some of the motivation to proclaim a foreigner in this case, but Alexander the Great as a pharaoh in Egypt was so culturally motivating because of what had happened 2 centuries earlier under the Persians. Like this idea that we're having a restorative influence. Yes, there have been puppet kings placed by Persians on the throne, but now this is someone from the outside who's defeated our enemies and becoming, whether or not it was a political motivation or not, but now Alexander the Great is Pharaoh of Egypt because.
So it almost feels like there is a psychological or even an anthropological feature of this, right? Like this in terms of how we as humans have developed. This is just
there's a patterning. Term, I can't remember what it is, but it's the term used to describe how our brains are wired to automatically make connections even when there are no connections to be made. Like it's why we see faces in clouds. Like there's no pareidolia. The brain sees it somehow. We do the same thing with like connecting all these events, how these conspiracy theories. You'll make all these crazy connections because the brain is hardwired to do that because it's a survival mechanism.
I mean, we can really, from a psychological, I'm more comfortable talking about anthropological perspectives, but I think from individuals and then into social psychology / anthropology perspective, an oppressed group has basically 3 avenues. They can be completely culturally acculturated into the group. They lose their identity of expression as they're being adopted into the new group that's conquered them. 2, they can physically, militarily resist open armed conflict. That's one way oppressed groups react. The third is to, in a way, accept the state of their condition, but the ancillary psychological mechanism is to say this won't be forever. This is a psychology of oppression, that there is some hope built in. This, and I hate to use the most notable, but among Southern slaves, there was a thought that eventually they'd be free. They didn't know when it was going to happen, but there was this idea that eventually, through some divine providence, that they would receive freedom. There'd be a general emancipation. And we see this in a lot of cultures and societies where they're the oppressed group, and those tend to take on religious mythical tradition that our gods who are now defeated, or our God who's now defeated, will bring us forward, not only putting our enemies down, but placing us above them. It's not just getting back to an even playing field. It is now a new social order where we're the ones on top, in order so that we can oppress those that oppressed us. And that was one of the, I hate to say it, that was one of the early features of Christianity the minute they became the dominant group. They had no problem. It wasn't about being even. It was about now exacting that kind of penalty upon the people that had oppressed or perceived to oppress them.
That's why Athanasius reintroduced the book of Revelation into the New Testament canon, so he could use it for political purposes.
Well, he thought it was written about him, or these sections, particularly. I mean, when he writes about it, he goes, "Me." I'm like, "What?
For real?
Like, for real? Yeah.
No way.
That's hilarious. He did.
And his justification for adding it into the back end, because almost nobody wanted anything to do with it because they thought it was a failed prophecy, because they were never supposed to end up on top. So this was failed prophecy. So it underwent like a little bit of reinterpretation, and he re-adds it as he's struggling to like maintain power. So in his 39th festival later, 39th
Feastal
later, he uses the quote that's also found in Deuteronomy. Let no one add to or take away from this book. So he used that and connected it to his list. He said, let no one add or take away from this list, lest you be cursed.
Yeah,
and that's the list that stayed.
It's important to understand that there's 2 important things about that letter. Like, we talk about the canonization of the Bible. We could talk about that all day. But one of the ways he defended Revelation, right, it was generally agreed upon that, yes, some people knew it wasn't written by John, right, the apostle. Other people thought it was written by John, this other figure who was a revelator. But the church didn't want to say it was the utterances of a madman. They wanted to, there was a lot of imagery Christians had used in the earlier centuries to kind of support themselves as the oppressed. But when they became, in charge of the state religion, in the 370s, because after 376, there is no more. Once Theodosius comes to power, there is no formal pagan system anymore, even though it had already been languishing under the offspring and relations
to a whole other level, though.
Right. He took it. He banishes, and it's a verboten after that. Yeah. He put himself in a position not only to tell you what's going to be authoritative texts, again, that becomes the canon, but he also is willing to say he is the person among all the patriarchs of the church that's charged with leading them through this period, because he identified himself as one of the figures in the book of Revelation. He says, by the way, this is me. And people forget that and the problem is he's in Alexandria, and there's a lot of contention between the different patriarchs, and many weren't willing to accept him, but he was so politically powerful and had enough people on his side that that's eventually how it rolls forward. Is not only are we going to include Revelation, we're going to informally accept this list of authoritative scripture, although the Syriac church still kept their list, the Ethiopic church kept their list, right? But officially, we're going to agree that it's a really good list, and we're going to go with it right now. But it was never formally decreed that this is our list of scriptures. But he also did say, if you take away from my list, you're violating the tenets of God's will. Like exactly what
how convenient
Ricky's talking about. Yeah.
Oh, nuts.
I mean, people think Rome was the center of Christian theological scholarship, and it wasn't. It was Alexandria. When you study the early church, it's Antioch and Alexandria are the two centers of Christianity that are defining what will eventually become Christian thought. It's really not Rome. Rome's they do have some people that add in, but Rome's later centuries. But second, third centuries, it's different regions that are actually formulating what Christianity is going to look at.
That's not just an accident of preservation.
Well, there was this thing called the Muslim conquest that really displaced the patriarchs. So up until 6th century, we don't have to worry 6th, 7th century, when again there's things that happens before the Muslim conquest, like the Sassanid, Parthian, Sassanid problems with the Roman Empire. There are times that Palestine falls out of control of the Byzantine Empire. The last is against when the true cross was stolen under the reign of Heraclius. Like the first Christian crusade was to recover the true cross. It was the first military venture in the Roman Empire where the church paid for the military means of production. All of the coffers of the church were cleaned out because the Roman government didn't have enough money. They paid soldiers, made weapons and armor, and they went into Persia to reclaim the true cross, which had been looted previously during an earlier military conquest of the region.
So there was an actual object that they had that somebody had that had they determined this was the true cross, and this was the recovery effort.
Yes, well, pieces of the true cross. So Constantine's
they were going to put them all together.
So you can't deny the source. It was Constantine's mom who found it.
Sure, I just assumed that
you thought it was a joke. No, there was an entire church dedicated and to its possession, in charge of it, and its presentation as a true cross.
So was this the one? So there was a piece of wood that was actually collected by Constantine's mother.
Pieces.
Yeah.
Oh, and remember, she collected and there were nails also collected by Constantine's mom from the true cross. Now, many of those nails ended up in both Constantine's the armor of Constantine's horse, so he'd be protected in battle. Yeah, they were incorporated as accoutrement into his personal assemblages of weapons and, well, in this case, armor, so that he'd be protected. Yeah. So, because they were magical, and if you have how can Constantine die if he's ever attacked, if he's got his horse's armor and his armor have these pieces of the true cross. I believe it was mostly into the horse's armor, but I mean, I could be wrong. It's a long time since I read it, but this was the idea that you incorporate these objects for their protective power.
Wow. Yeah.
Wild stuff. Oh man. We had a question a while back from Claude. Maybe switching gears a little bit.
Yeah.
I think. But can we give an overview of what they expected to happen in an apocalypse, mainly overthrowing Rome or God manifesting in some localized way as during Exodus? Or was it more like dying, sickness, or just better earthly life? Yes, all of the above.
Yeah.
D is the answer.
Yeah. Well, and I just looked it up real quick, my notes. Constantine did have one of the nails set into his helmet.
Oh, cool.
To wear
do we actually have that stuff? Or
No.
Or is it gone?
It's all gone. And most serious people realize that there were a lot of nails, a lot of old nails in Jerusalem, and Constantine's mom was somewhat of a promoter of the religion. Like Constantine's mom was a diehard, if anything.
Yeah.
She was definitely a true
believer.
Yeah.
So I mean, just so people are aware, like this, there's a period in I promise Claude Simeon we'll get to your question here in a second, but there's a period from around the Hasmonean period, so 180, 70, 60, 50 BCE up through to basically the final destruction of Jerusalem in 132 or 34 CE, where it was very popular for people to what's the term, to ossilize, to when they buried their dead. You could probably hear my dog scratching away at his bed in the background. I'm sorry.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, that's what that is. He's trying very hard.
I thought it was NSA monitoring this podcast.
Probably, right? But he stopped because it doesn't seem to be doing any good. So now he's just staring at the bed. Anyways, so they would the bodies, they would entomb the bodies. The bodies would decompose, and then after I think it was a year, maybe it was a little longer, they would come back, and then they'd take all that's left as bones, and they'd set these bones into a box measuring about 2 feet by a foot, and maybe 18 inches deep, called an ossuary. We have literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ossuary from
thousands
all over.
Yeah.
Thousands, yeah, probably. In fact, when I was staying at the big fancy conference hotel in Jerusalem on Mount Scopus, I was there for a conference, and one of the people from the conference actually drew my attention to the planters, a number of the planters in the conference lobby and at various places in the hotel. They're ossuaries, like they're just all over the place, right? So prevalent, so ubiquitous that the hotel bought some and decided to put plants in. But anyways, so this is a practice. Sorry. This is a practice that was occurring over this 300 or so year period through the Roman period, and along with this process, what we're discovering in a lot of Jewish tombs from the period is piles and piles of crucifixion nails, which it appears, and archaeologists are still a little puzzled by this, but this seems to be the case. It appears that crucifixion nails were collected as like charms or ritual objects of some sort and deposited in these bone boxes for when you're entombing, when you're finally entombing your dead loved ones. So it's no wonder that they were able to find plenty of crucifixion nails for Constantine's mother to take home with him.
And to be fair, the Romans kind of looked at nails as nails. I mean, there were longer nails and shorter nails, but like there were no specialized. I mean, there were certain sizes and gauges of nails that Romans produced that would be used in crucifixion, but the Romans didn't have a quote unquote crucifixion nail, which makes even the identification much harder, right? Like, so were these just nails for, nail and wood? Was it in a crucifix? Or I'm sorry, no, I shouldn't say crucifix. Was it in a cross that was used for crucifixion, or wood that was used for crucifixion, or was it just construction? And it makes it really hard. But
sometimes they use that at all.
These objects become very powerful. Like this process Kipp is talking about is a very powerful form of cultural ancestral veneration. Like this is the care and maintenance of the deceased and their spirit after death. The idea that, tombs would be open, people would be coming and going. And after about a year or so, and usually sometimes it commemorated on the date, sometimes it was a seasonal activity, the bodies of once a body is decayed to the point where it's just bones and maybe a little hair and a little flesh, but mostly desiccated and, decomposition has definitely started. This idea that the mortal remains have allowed the spirit to go on. And so now it needs to undergo a process of secondary burial and placement. And so in the front part of tombs was where the newly dead were kept. And in the later parts, the back parts of the tombs were where you want to call them the long dead, but now the dead that have transcended or gone on are kept. This was a very ritualized process, which again, that's why there's all these apologetics again in the Christian Gospels about it was a tomb that had never been used because everybody knew there'd be a lot of bodies in there. Like if you were to say, "Hey Pat, you excavated a tomb," I'd be like, "Yeah, and we pulled out X number of sets of human remains," because you never find just one. Like again, later in Christian tradition, that becomes more commonplace to put one person in a tomb and close it up. But that has to do again with the establishment of martyria, like 4th century.
Okay.
Like again, and that usually pertained to martyrs. Like again, I've been to a few excavations that I've participated in Romania where we have martyria in place in situ where the human remains have been recovered. In a couple of cases, it's a single person. Other places we had 2, 3, as many as 5. They were all in the same place, but the remains were segregated from each other. But in this earlier period, like Kipp's talking about, while it was important to maintain that these bones are in their own box or their own place, and they weren't commingled, they were kind of little warehouses for the remains of the dead. Hundreds of years worth of people being placed in here. And it wasn't uncommon in the Roman system either before Christianity, but they just largely cremated their dead. And after the Christian period, there's a similar process going on where people are placed in sepulchers.
Yeah, there's some pretty famous tombs just on the let me get my geography here. The on the eastern side of the city of Jerusalem, right? That you can go and visit and you can see just dozens of ossuaries lying around all over the place.
Yeah, and some of the larger again, tombs had shrines associated with them at the point of entry for the veneration and honoring of the dead. Like this was not outside Jewish tradition of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, the dead, and again, the dead were part of the daily life of ancient Jews. Like, again, this idea that the dead weren't gone, like to some far off place, they were still around for a period, right? Again, the idea that your mom and dad visited you in a dream when 6 months after you're dead would not have been something anybody in ancient Jerusalem would have even batted an eye at. Like, yeah, whatever. They would have just accepted as true. Yeah, we know they hang out for a while. And so what did your dad say to you? Well, he didn't really say anything. He looked at peace. Oh, well, that's good. I mean, that would have been the general, well, your mom came back and, she still doesn't like my wife. She thinks my kids are out of place. Whatever social and anxiety, psychological thing was going on you after the death of a loved one, I think would be manifested in a cultural system that not only allowed for it, but it actually supported and encouraged this kind of a concept. So that's it. I'm done. I love talking about death and burial, so like that's my thing.
Yeah. You sent me a whole bunch of literature a while back about burial and crucifixion practices, and
I did.
I read all of it. I think I still have it somewhere in my computer.
You should.
I learned a lot. It's very fun. How much detail went into this, and how much thought went into it. And it goes back to apocalypticism. One of the reasons, from what I understand, is they believed in a fleshly resurrection, like in Matthew 22. They believed that bodies were going to be restored and come back to life.
I think some
not all of them.
Right, but I think those that saw, like, this is where we talk about what's this renewal? Is this a temporal renewal? Like, I think some Christians who were living when the apocalypse occurred believed that their bodies were also going to be made new, like their living body. Yeah. As they're standing there, they're going to become a new being, because disease, all of the imperfections of your state would be changed as well, right? And if you were dead and you were going on to this kingdom beyond, definitely you were getting a tune-up in a way that was going to be really good for you. Whether or not it was physical and or spiritual, all your shortcomings were going to be taken care of.
Yeah, and you see that reflected in the Gospels. Jesus given a new body, and Mary or the gardener or whoever it was didn't even recognize him.
But he wasn't given a new body.
And then he walked through a wall. Right. It's all over the place.
Exactly. And then with Thomas, he still has his wounds.
Yeah.
Right. So even the accounts show that there's this different understanding. In some cases, he's just a ghost, a spirit that looks human, fully human. Other cases, it's a body and there's no problems with it. In other cases, it's a body with holes. Yeah. Right. With holes in it. Again, why the dead should need to eat, I don't know. But many ancient cultures believe that you still had to nourish yourself and take care of yourself in the afterlife.
Yep.
So hopefully that I answered your question, Claude. Same.
They're all wow.
We're all over the place.
We are. This is the stream of everywhere and nowhere.
But this is fun. I'm just hanging out.
Yeah,
drinking my wine.
My coffee.
So, I'm done with beer. So
I am. I'm having a side discussion in the chat.
Yeah, what's going on with that?
With a so. Yahweh's blessed is, I'm fairly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he is a Black Hebrew Israelite. And one of the things that Black Hebrew Israelites believe is that the vowels in the Hebrew language have all been supplied after the fact by speakers of different languages, and that the proper they say there are no vowels in Hebrew, and the proper pronunciation of every syllable is with an ah sound, which is basic nonsense if you understand how languages work. You can't just do that. So anyways, yeah. So, no, we actually, as I was explaining to him, we actually have texts. These are from the Dead Sea Scrolls, but we have other manuscripts as well, which show fuller orthographies, which is something that happens at the time when writers, predominantly Jewish writers, started to see the need for preserving proper vocalizations of the text. And the reason for this is because in a consonantal language like Hebrew, the way you pronounce a word very much affects its meaning. So, a word in Hebrew can look identical to another word in Hebrew and mean slightly different things based on how you pronounce it. So pronunciation is really important, right? And if you're just woodenly pronouncing everything with a vowels, you're communicating nonsense. Nobody can understand what you're saying. So we have some early texts that preserve vowel letters such as
You're
vowels
banned now. So.
and all of. Oh, okay. I'll just finish explaining then, and we'll move on.
Sorry,
that went in a very racist direction.
A bunch of really racist shit. So,
oh, did it? I missed what he said.
He said, not one of those black Negro extra melanin having people. Like, whoa. Okay.
Oh God.
Okay.
Whoops. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
No tolerance for that bullshit here.
So, anyways, guys, we understand how languages work. We understand how Hebrew worked in antiquity, even before the invention of the Nakud or the vowel pointing in the medieval period. It's based on the pronunciation of the language that we can actually track through texts that preserve the invention of these vowel letters. We also have instances of transliteration in other languages, even in the New Testament, right? There's Aramaic, but mostly Aramaic words that are transliterated into Greek. It's just, sorry, this was a tangent, but
no, but it's an important one because in a few cases we do have inscriptions that are parallel inscriptions that preserve it as well. I mean, not everything has to be the fucking Rosetta Stone. Right, like every languages have this plethora of there's not a lot of them all over the place, but there are enough of them in the archaeological record that we give to people like Kipp. Like again, we look at it as archaeologists, go, hey, what do you think it says? We do our bad first, translations, and then we give them to the paleographers, right? And they go, well, you guys were close, but this is what it actually says. Like again, I have a buddy of mine he specializes in epigraphy, and we're always joking. I'm like, I don't even know why I bother doing an initial, like when we find something and it has an inscription on it, I don't know why I bother doing a translation. As
you can't help yourself.
Well, we do because we're supposed to, right? That's part of the archaeological process,
absolutely.
Right? Detailing the stuff as best we can, both in the field and in post excavation analysis before it goes to further curation and study.
That's right.
And then some, 9 times out of 10, some epigrapher comes back and goes, well, you missed this, or you missed that, or I would have translated it this way because I've been studying Latin of that period for the last 30 years. And, you're like, wow, and on easy stuff like, the great thing about Roman epigraphy, it was formulaic. So we have all these nice abbreviations. So it makes it really nice. But when you start getting to Aramaic, and I think Hebrew would probably be more difficult, but I'm just guessing. These become really problematic because they wrote out words. So there was no uniform system of contraction when they were abbreviating. Abbreviations were, if they did occur, were sometimes ad hoc. At least the Roman system, they had an established formula that pretty much held up, not always, but largely across the empire. Like you study epigraphy of the Roman period, you go to Egypt, okay, I can translate that tombstone. You go to Roman Britain in a different period 200 years later, some small differences, but you can get through it. I don't know if you could do that in Hebrew. I just don't know.
That's a good question.
It's really hard.
I'm not sure actually, because I'm not I'm kind of racking my brain right now for ancient or Second Temple examples of abbreviations even. So it's interesting.
When I sent you that stuff on Aramaic curse bowls, like just trying to read them, how people actually had to break the characters down on the patterns found inside, like I'd give it to an expert. I'd be like, hey, I found this. Here you go. I'm not even trying, because it looked like it was so difficult to read and to make sense of, because the way the characters were more jumbled together than normal. So very tight form of writing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if anyone has any last minute questions to ask, I'm dying.
I still have a little bit of wine left.
Oh man.
So I poured a big glass. But
well, you don't have to go to bed right now. You can stay up. You can stay up and finish drinking.
Tomorrow is a holiday. I'm told.
It is.
It's true.
Yeah. So I don't have kids anymore, or I shouldn't say I don't have kids. I still have kids. But all my kids are out of school, so I have no idea. I have no idea when school starts.
No concept of time.
You find out if it's a national holiday when you show up someplace and it's closed. You're like, oh,
yeah. Hey,
you don't have a school calendar to rely on anymore.
This was a regular thing for me when I lived in Norway. God bless the Norwegians, but honestly, they're not the most outwardly helpful people. They have this view that, you know, you're a grown up, you should be able to figure a lot of this stuff out for yourself. So when I lived in Norway for that first year that I lived in Norway, I was never told when there was a holiday, because I'm a grown up. I should be able to read a calendar. I should be able to figure it out for myself. So there were several times when I got on. No, sorry, just an avatar. This is AI. It's not real. There were several times when I got on the bus early in the morning, rode the bus all the way to work, got off the bus, and the university was locked up tight. And I didn't find out until I got there. So yeah. Thanks, Norway.
Well, it is a holiday tomorrow.
It is.
Labor Day.
We'll put the papers and some stuff we discussed in the show notes for anybody that's interested. I did want to pitch one thing because I've been asked before, and it's just easier if I do it on shows like Ricky's rather than everything on. I'm not on X/Twitter. So for those asking me to communicate that way, I just don't have access that way. I refuse to.
I have to tell Pat.
Evil
I have
cabal.
to tell Pat what's happening on.
He does.
X/
About once a week, I get a Twitter/X update for all the juicy shit from Kipp. But for those that are interested, I am teaching this fall at Peninsula College, like I do now. If you want to take any of my classes, Ricky will drop the link for the classes I teach in the show notes. You can register now. These are credited classes. I'm teaching Ritual and Religion. It's an anthropology class. If you're interested in that stuff, you're welcome to join. But the class that I'm really hoping people jump on is the History of Witchcraft and Magic class that I'm teaching this fall, which I think for those wanting to take a class online, it'll be a large, robust group of people. The class I've designed so that the online environment will be as close to an in-person environment as possible. I mean, you can talk in class. We have this fully integrated classroom and environment experience. The college has really helped me. They gave me the support I need to teach classes way, because we're encouraging people that want to take classes online to do so. So it's once a week, and then you have some independent study during the week. So anybody interested in that, go ahead and look it up, and I'll see you in the fall. 3 weeks till school starts.
What's the first class that you're teaching?
It's the anthropology. It's the archaeology of ritual and religion. We get into process mode. It's a lot of the theoretical side of anthropology. Like, why are humans wired through our evolutionary process to be religious? Why do we engage in ritual? What's the intersection between ritual and religion? We do a little bit of, chicken or the egg. Did ritual become before religion, or was religion informed by ritual, and how they interact with each other? When we talk a lot about the ritual process, what are forms of rituals like? And what I like is that when my students are done with this course, they keep going, well, that's a purification ritual, or that's a ritual of this type, right? Like, and nice. I enjoy that, and that's really how I approach what we're doing even here tonight. So.
I mean, that sounds a lot like Pat. I would say that if Richard Carrier is watching, that's a course that I would recommend that he takes. Sounds like that's something that he could really use.
I'm going to defer to your recommendation.
He could use a lot of courses.
No, but I mean, it's a 200 level class, so
empty.
It's a 200 level class, so the only if you're an adult learner coming in for a class like that, that's all I'd ask is that you contact me before you attempt to register, because I'd have to give you permission to register if you're not a student already, because there is a previous anthropology requirement, basically like introduction to anthropology. But if you're like, hey, I went to college 10 years ago, I got a degree, we can make allowances for that. But it's on a case-by-case basis. I want to map sports events and rock concerts into
I actually think
rituals. There's quite a bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, Edward O. Wilson, famous biologist, social biologist. Is that the term? I think he did a lot of that kind of stuff.
Well, we politics as well. Look at the ritualization that the rituals that we do regarding just public events. Like, people don't like it, but in the United States, the singing of the national anthem at all sporting events is a ritualized behavior in order to induce certain attitudes and conditions among the participants. Like, whether or not you like it or not, it's just something we do, and it's part of our collective bond, so to speak, from an anthropological, sociological perspective. But there are we can study this in the field and go, what effect is this having on people? After a football game, people feel more patriotic.
Right.
We can measure it in surveys, right? Yeah. So this is something that we do, and we also, like, if you look at, again, Ricky can talk about this in more detail. Again, look at a military funeral. They're, depending on the branch of the military, but they're all pretty close. There is a formulaic, ritualized process of internment of a military veteran that is so standardized as to, without even being told what it is, if you watch it, because it's so pervasive in our culture. And that's a ritualized process. So ritual is something that we can talk about quite a bit, and how they inform our cultural norms and our understandings of what's expected in society settings.
I think my favorite modern example of a ritual being used as a sports event and linking it to a religion is when Gojira played at the Olympics, linking the Olympics to Satanism. That was good shit.
Wow. Yeah, it really was.
It was fucking
that might have been one of the most amazing things that I've ever seen. Certainly seen in a long time. I didn't get to see it live because I had no idea Gojira was playing. So, but yeah. Hey, can you highlight that comment from Anton Gomez? I just translated a piece. That one, yeah. I just translated a piece of a Kipp Davis episode on the Dead Sea Scrolls where Paul Agia was on just to talk about Star Wars in my Spanish content channel. That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Great.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Anton. So for people who are interested, I'm gonna go. Let me know when that, if you upload that, I'd like to check that out. But that's an episode. That's the last episode I did in my series, actually, on the Dead Sea Scrolls, that I hope to get back to at some point after I finish writing. I've got another writing project that I'm working on right now, but yeah, it's a way of imagining how early Jewish literature worked by exploring the amazing world of the Star Wars universe and the modern history of the Star Wars universe. And who better to talk about that kind of stuff than Paul Agia, who helped contribute to the modern history of the Star Wars universe, which is, I guess, the only history of the Star Wars universe, isn't it?
Yeah, the official history. And just because we talked about it, if you're interested and you can't take a class in it, I'm going to make a recommendation from one of the course texts of my class.
Oh,
it's Matthew Rosano's Ritual in Human Evolution and Religion. It's a psychological and ritual resource. It's not an overly long book. It's only about 180 pages, but it's kind of the newest thing. So I'll push this in. And I'm a big fan of his work. He's kind of one of the leaders in this field in anthropology. So I'll put this in the show notes for Ricky as well. So if you can't get a class, you can do some self-reading and education.
Sure. You're just biased, Pat. Shilling for big anthropology.
Well, I'm going to tell you that there's the field of evolutionary psychology and anthropology are kind of going together. They're realizing that there's these big drivers for why we do the things we do, and I kind of like that stuff.
Were you paid to say that?
Yes.
Oh my god! All right, well, I'm gonna wrap the stream up there because I'm fading fast.
Okay. Oh,
but what?
Can I pitch?
Oh yeah, please.
Sure. I'm going live tomorrow. Tomorrow is Monday. It's Labor Day. So yeah, come check out my stream. Tomorrow I'll be on at 1:00 Pacific time, and I'm going to be live with Derek Lambert from Myth Vision podcast. So it'll be fun, and
it's going to be a very fun topic.
Yes, so
I'm personally excited about it.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm going to be talking about some of the things that we talked about tonight. I'm going to be talking about Jewish messianism, apocalypticism, scripture interpretation, the Talmud, and it's all going to be it has to do with a video that Godless Engineer made while I was on my holidays. So come check it out.
All right. Well, thanks again, guys, for joining us in the chat. Thanks, Dr. Kipp and Pat, for joining me for this very fun conversation. I enjoyed myself.
Well, thank you, Ricky.
Me too. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to you getting back on a more regular schedule now. The kids.
Yeah, me too. I have missed this show.
Oh, you guys. You're full of shit. No, I'm kidding. I do appreciate that. I really do. All right. Let's see if I remember how to end.
You don't. This is the thing, right? You suck at the
stream ending. Will go forever until he ends it. We should keep talking.
I once upon a time I had an outro video, but it's gone. And,
no.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, we're just going to keep talking until we get cut off. So
that works.
That's
going to happen.
The abrupt ending will mean that Ricky figured it out.
It's going to happen right about now-ish. All right. Love you guys.
So, Kipp, I was thinking we could engage in some academic exercise on.
Yeah, let's do that right about